So all things considered, this was a fairly tame episode of Danmachi, but it also kind of is worst case scenario because after everything that we've experienced with Season 3, the one character we would want to see get back into the dungeon safe and sound is Wine, and she's the one character who probably isn't going to get back into the dungeon safe and sound. So the best way to describe this episode is probably success as well as failure. The success was actually fairly interesting, seeing the allies we've made along the journey of Danmachi actually come into aid. So even though they knew that there was going to be some sabotage and some manipulation, they were still able to one-up the enemy and be able to get most of them into the safe zone, or at least approach the safe zone. But of course, when you have someone like Wine, who's very easy to kind of lose, because if she gets scared, she's probably going to run the other direction. It's no surprise that there's also going to be some failure in that department. And I was really wondering, because by the looks of this episode, I was pretty confident in the fact that Belle and his party were going to be able to get all of the monsters into the dungeon, and while, of course, many of the familiars would probably assume that Belle was involved, there would be no definitive proof, and then his familia would be fine. Even if there was the suspicion, there's no definitive proof, so his standing would just remain to be, he's the adventurer who destroyed the city for a bunch of gold, rather than he's the adventurer who destroyed the city for a bunch of monsters. So it felt to me that we weren't actually going to have that negative of a consequence. But then, we enter this episode towards the very, very end, and we have the one character Belle would never, ever abandon, now interacting with other adventurers, many of which who firmly believe in and trust in Belle, and he's now going to have to stand up against them. So it seems to me that they probably all will get into the dungeon, but I think Belle's familia is 100% going to crumble. And while I think many of us assumed that was going to happen after everything that has transpired over this season, especially over the past couple of weeks, watching this episode and how comfy it generally was, I was thinking to myself, maybe he's actually going to get around this scot-free, and maybe he's going to have his luck once again be on his side. But honestly, I don't think so. There's a lot of uncertainty about what's happening in this episode, and that's what makes it such a fun and compelling episode. I mean, they introduced a harem joke mechanic that had me rolling. I thought it was amazing, because you can't deny how many females have latched onto Belle. I mean, you kick this episode off with one of them just kind of destroyed and unable to do paperwork, saying, I'm taking a break, you can't take a break. Well, if one worker's going to crash the system, that's on the management's department. And I'm like, hot damn. She got a point, but holy shit, you didn't have to be so blunt about it. And you have all these individual females, most of which are trying to aid him in doing different things, but what makes that entire sequence so hilarious is you have Eyes, who is watching Belle, who after was granted permission to track him, which makes sense why they were so against Eyes originally, because she is probably one of Belle's greatest allies with this familia. So for her to kind of like scout and say, if anything happens, I will take him down, and all she sees is a bunch of females, one after another, saying pretty provocative things from her point of view, and she just thinks he's a scoundrel, and I thought that was hilarious. It's pretty much in line with Season 1 or 2 comedy of Danmachi, but we haven't seen too much of it in Season 3 based on the storytelling that we're witnessing. So to have someone who is a bit of an airhead and a little dense just fully admit to what everyone is thinking watching the scene, even knowing why they're there, and to have him just being like basically face first and a bunch of tits, or the characters are saying they're going to use him for sexual pleasure, there's a lot of different things and misunderstandings, and not even misunderstandings, characters fully admitting that they're going to use Belle like a boy toy, and she's just sitting up there being like, what a scoundrel. That's hilarious, and I think a really good breathing moment for the episode, because we've had a lot of heaviness, we've had a lot of depression. I think it was a good way to kind of ease us back into a normal state of mind for Danmachi before entering the remainder of the episode, and clearly episodes 11 and 12, where you know it's going to get heavy once again. I think sometimes shows like these that do get back into that serious storytelling, they forget to have a bit of fun to breathe and just say, okay, you know, it's okay to let out a sigh of relief. Despite us watching this show weekly, it still doesn't have as many moments to let us kind of decompress. So it's nice to have that moment to really just say, oh, everything's going to be okay, to let our guard down a little bit, to then seeing Wine alone and afraid, being like, God damn it, we know she's probably going to be okay, but Belle and his familia definitely aren't. This episode definitely had some unpredictability to it, especially with the magical items and magic, like the cloaks of invisibility, the poisonous gas that basically makes them hallucinate to see, oh, the monsters went this way, oh no, the monsters are invading. There's a lot of cool mechanics at play, especially considering that you have Haruhime as well as Hestia basically on a roof using a map tracking everyone while also being able to talk like they're on a cell phone. There's a lot of cool mechanics at play to make this plan seem like it's going to go down without a hitch, and for the most part it really did. And even when you get this like dwarven battle axe master come crashing down, It just seemed like, he was frozen, the monsters are getting away. It seemed like everything was going to work out. And the fact that they were able to convince me watching this episode that things were probably going to work out and there's going to be a different threat for episodes 11 and 12, I was kind of assuming that the monsters would go back into the dungeon. And what was going to happen is they would be confronted being like, even though we don't have proof, we know damn well you're the reason these monsters went back in. We're going to do everything in our power to expose you. I thought that's the direction they were going, but seemingly what's going to happen is the monsters probably will all go down, but there's going to be definitive proof that Belle and his familia were involved in this, or at least Belle was. So if that's the case, I feel like Belle's the type of character who would take the high road and say it was all on me, they had nothing to do with it, he would leave the familia. I think that's a possibility. There's just a lot of uncertainty, but also you kind of get a sneaking suspicion of where it's going to go, and it's not looking good for Belle specifically. Just overall, this was a very funny episode, but a very hard-hitting episode all at the same time. It was actually one of the better balanced episodes for goofy as well as serious. And honestly, I don't know. Episodes 11 and 12 have me very riled up and worried, but I'm excited nonetheless. Without a doubt, this definitely feels like the turning point in DanMachi's story. This feels like once Season 3 wraps up, where the content goes in the next arc, or if Season 4, if we're lucky enough to experience it, is probably going to shape the foundation for everything to come afterwards. What you generally see in a story like DanMachi, where you assume it's going to be a dungeon-crawling adventure with a harem and an overpowered protagonist, you feel like it's pretty easy to predict the storytelling going forward, and to some extent you can kind of say that for the earlier content. But what's interesting is where Season 3 is probably going to leave off. While we do probably assume that Belle is going to be ostracized and kind of pushed away from everyone else, it doesn't seem like there's a clear-cut answer of what happens at that point. Because if Belle has to go and journey beyond where we typically associate with this world and characters, what's that going to do? Is it going to be more on the god side? Is it going to be more on the personal side? There's a lot of uncertainty. And I feel like what this arc is doing is not only telling a really compelling story for what we're witnessing right now, but it's setting up something so much bigger than anything our imaginations could possibly assume could happen. This is a very interesting point for a story, because generally you don't even get to see 3 seasons of a show like DanMachi. And while you could argue, well, it's only 1 core per season, so it's pretty much in line to the amount of episodes a lot of decently popular series get, it still feels like this is a show that has the potential to run a lot longer than most shows in a similar coat of paint. So to have it feel like we're about to enter territory that most anime wish they could enter, but the production doesn't get greenlit to go this far, it's really exciting. This is one of the rare cases where I kind of hope the protagonist fails and bad things happen, because if bad things happen, the storytelling could probably go to places I can't even possibly imagine. But even if he does somehow succeed and doesn't crash his familia and he gets to stay in the city, I feel like even then there's still going to be so much hostility thrown towards him that I don't think there's any possible way for this boy to actually survive, all things considered. I guess only time will tell. It's very hard to say for sure, but yeah, this is an incredible episode. I just love how every time I can walk out of a DanMachi episode just more blown away than the last, even for an episode that made me laugh as much as this one did. Let me know your thoughts and feelings and definitely your theories down below. What did you think of episode 10 and its unique direction that it took for the story? Whatever you feel, and of course let me know. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.